just wanted to do a quick unboxing video of Visitor in Blackwood Grove by Mary Flanagan and Max Seidman. I picked this game up at PAX East this past weekend, and I had a chance to play it there and had a lot of fun with it, honestly. So the quick thing is it's a 5 to 15 minute game for players 8 years old and older, and about 3 to 6 players per game. So there's a bunch of instructions. There's the playing board. This is the trust board for the kid. The visitor's screen. The play cards for the kid, the visitor, and the various agents. So basically, if you play a 3-player game, you have the kid, the visitor, and 1 agent. If you play with more players, you just increase the number of agents you have available. So you have FBI, NSA, CIA, and DOE. And finally, you have some tokens for the various players, and also this set of tokens, which I'll explain more later. And finally, we have the sets of cards. These are just various objects. I forget exactly how many cards there are in the set. And finally, there are these things in the side here. These are for holding up cards. This is for your trust marker. So the way gameplay works, or at least the mechanic that I find most interesting of the gameplay, is you have these cards here, and you also have these example rules. So a rule can be things that contain metal, or like in my game that I was in, objects that are larger than a person. And so if we pick things that contain metal, and we go through here, on this board, the story is that it's set in like the 1980s alien movies, where inevitably you have a kid who it's pretty sure there's an alien out there, and the visitor typically wants to talk to the kids. And then you have various agents of the government also trying to find the visitor for their own reasons. And what the alien has, or the visitor has, to protect them is a force field. And the way that they will allow people to come through is if they can guess the rule on the force field, which would in this case would be things that contain metal. So, and the way that you communicate about the rule and also end up proving it is through objects, and particularly like the images of objects. So if obviously this first one here is unlikely to contain metal, and so this would be put out. The same with the newspaper, pacifier, but then if scissors definitely contain metal and would be here. And so I know I play the agent, so on each term I get to test secretly a card from my hand, and I get to ask the visitor, hey, is this in or out? And the visitor will tell me. Eventually, I can try to guess what that rule is, and the way to prove it, I don't just blurt out, oh, I think the rule is things that contain metal. Instead, I would pick 4 cards, and I would align them. So here are my 4 cards. I would say, okay, I think these are in and these are out. There is some degree of kind of like visitor fiat with this. And then what the visitor does once I've put this out is behind their screen they use these tokens, and they kind of match up with the 4 tokens which of the cards are in and which of the cards are out. And if we match up, then I've proven the rule and I win. And if they don't, then everyone's gotten more information. And the reason I was saying is obviously there's a little bit of visitor fiat, because I had said originally this boat is out because it's a wooden boat, sailboat, and all those things. But you could easily argue that there is metal on the boat. And this actually came up with the boat in my game because the rule was, is it bigger than a human? And then I could always ask the question, well, is this an actual boat, or is this a toy boat? Because a toy boat isn't necessarily bigger than a human. But yeah, so that's the basics of the set and what you get. The big thing for me is just thinking in terms of using that prove mechanic in terms of other games, because oftentimes, particularly in role-playing games and fantasy role-playing games, we have these otherworldly creatures. They could be ancient fae or gods or golem protectors of a particular area, and they too could also benefit from this sort of mechanic. There could be a protection in place, and typically in many games when you had this sort of rule, somebody had to blurt it out, and it was either a yes or a no, and you knew exactly what they were thinking when they did it, and that was pretty much, like, in some ways kind of ruined the surprise. So I think it would be interesting to be able to have multiple trials within a D&D game where you finally over time got to guess how to unlock the next area. But those are just my thoughts. What do you think?